Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy folks, and welcome back to another exciting, fantastic episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host Luke. Hope you're all doing well, hope you're all good. Now before I get into today's topic, which is another fun one, I just want to mention the show's sponsor, World of Books. You might have heard me in previous episodes mention it, but they are sponsoring the show, and what that means is that they've given me a coupon for you guys to use in their store. The coupon is Nerdy10, that's Nerdy 10, all higher case. Put that in when you get to your basket, and save yourselves 10% off any and all books on their system. World of Books is a company. I always forget. I always should really start with the company before I should start with the coupon. But I thought, get your excitement first, and then explain the company. That's how I like to do things. So World of Books is a company that does secondhand books. They rescue books from charity stores, from the pardon me, from the tip, from anywhere where they will go to a landfill. They save them and they sell them at low prices for you guys to enjoy. It's recycling. Instead of chopping down a new tree to reprint a new book, buy from them. It's cheap, it's recycling, and it's saving the planet. So check out World of Books. Use my code when you get to your checkout. That is again Nerdy10, Nerdy 10, all higher case. Put that in the coupon things and save yourself 10% off your order. All right then. So now the business side, because I'm professional now. I have a business side. So now that the business side. Sorry, you have to laugh at yourself sometimes. But now that the business side is done, I'm going to start with today's topic. So today's topic is a really exciting one. As you can tell, I'm always excited, but I'm quite excited for this one because this is an episode that I've wanted to record for a while, but I've had to keep putting it off because I've got other things to record, and it took me a while to complete this, even though it's a kid's game, but it took me a while to get around to finishing it. But before I get into that, I just want to mention that this is the movie tie-in series. Prior episodes that I've done, so I did Kung Fu Panda, the movie tie-in for that on the Xbox 360. Alien Clone and Marines. Hopefully people like that one. That one was quite a lot longer than the Kung Fu Panda one, but did Alien Clone and Marines. Then now I'm going to be doing Wall-E today. This should be the end of the series for now. I had decided a while ago that I was going to do 3 games because I only really had 3 sort of movie tie-in games I currently own. So the idea was do a test run, do 3, see how they do. And then while they're sort of collecting numbers and people are enjoying them or not enjoying them, that I would go off and I would go find more for cheap. And then we do another series at a later date. So this is going to be the last one that I do of this series for now. But by all means, go back and check out Kung Fu Panda. Go back and check out Aliens, Clone and Marines. I had a lot of fun playing those games. I had a lot of fun recording those episodes. You don't really need to watch them, but I would still say please watch them, not just for me, but also the fact that they're quite interesting, and also gives you kind of a heads up on kind of what this whole topic is about and the whole sort of series in total. So go back, listen to them. Kung Fu Panda, Alien, Clone and Marines, both in fact fantastic episodes. I really enjoyed making them. And so as I mentioned, today I'm going to be talking about the Wall-E, the game from 2007. I was going to say 2008. The 2007 Disney Pixar movie Wall-E, movie and tie game, published by THQ, made by the folks at Heavy Iron Studios. I will go into more detail about them in a minute. But what I want to do, I want to start off, even though I know this is a very audio format. In all fairness, while you listen to this, you could Google Disney Pixar's Wall-E's Xbox 360 game case, and you could follow along with me. But I will try my best to give you a audio description, big fancy words, of the box. So oh god, I'm really bad. Hold on 1 second. I had a biscuit earlier. Sorry, I just had to pause it and I've had a big long cough. I had a shortbread biscuit earlier, and it's some crumbs at the back of my throat. It's kind of getting to me, but I think I should be okay now. But if I go silent, I'm choking. Please phone an ambulance. Um, I shouldn't laugh. Don't do that. Like in all fairness, if you do care, message me on Twitter, and if I don't reply, then by all means panic. But please don't bother the ambulance service. That was a joke. Please don't sue me, NHS. Um, anyway, moving on. So, the front of the box, when you pick it up from the store, 2007, being a young bean, or young bean as I was back in the day, because we're going to look through my eyes, you would see on the front Disney Pixar's Wall-E. You got a picture of Wall-E. I would say, I don't know if he's on Earth. I wouldn't say he's on Earth because there's a big planet in the background, and I don't remember the Earth having a huge planet behind it. But he's on a big area full of junk. Next to him, you've got Eve smiling, quite happy, cheerful. Wall-E's waving on the front, and then you've got the ship that brought Eve down to the planet. Now, I will say before I carry on, Wall-E is one of my favorite Pixar movies, so I might be a bit biased because it is my number one favorite Pixar film. And I will get into as to why as we get into when we begin the actual review. But it is one of my favorites, so I might be a bit biased, but I just love this little robot. He reminds me of the movie Short Circuit. If anybody remembers that, that's a very old nostalgia sort of movie. Input. Oh, Johnny number 5. You know, it's you might not have seen it. You might have seen it. It's Short Circuit. They made a second one, which he was in New York, and at the end of it, he just goes full on like psycho. It's a fantastic movie. Not as good as the first one, but it's pretty good. Maybe one day I'll talk about it. But anyway, I'm going off topic. So we flip the box over. Now we're looking on the back. So on the back, again, on the right-hand side, you have Eve and Wall-E. On the left-hand side, you've got a bit of text and 3 screens of in-game footage. So at the top, we've got big headline, 1 small robot, 1 giant adventure. Then we've got a little text box that goes, make space for infinite action, astronomical fun, and a mission that's out of this world. Obviously using big fantastical language, as you've got to remember. This is a kid's game. You've got to sort of bring them in. So obviously on the front, it's basically the movie poster for Wall-E. You see that straight away, it's recognizable. You know what it is, even if you can't read. It's very sort of visually like, oh, I know what that is. I've seen the poster. I know it's, and you see Disney Pixar. You know it's going to be a good deal. If you're a parent, you're going to see that. Goes, yeah, my kid will like that. It's rated U. Even though I think it should be rated a bit higher because this game's freaking hard. But again, we'll get into that. And then you turn on the back again, you've got Wall-E in that. So again, it's very appeasing. The colours, the art style is very much of what you would expect from a kid's game. Then you got the 3 screens. First of all, the first picture is Wall-E with a gun. Well, not a gun. It's a futuristic blaster, but it is basically the function of it is a gun. And I can't wait to get talking about that section. The game, that's where the game changes completely. But so you've got a Wall-E with a blaster. It goes blast enemies and obstacles. Then you got the second one. Wall-E's on Earth, doing a pirouette. The thing that sort of ballerinas do. Pirouette, yeah, that thing. Explore action-packed worlds. And then the last screen, it goes race through the galaxy to save the planet, and you have Eve carrying Wall-E. Players 1 to 4, local co-op of 2, and the rest, you don't really need to know the rest. It's all sort of Dolby Atmos and all that, so it's not really that important. But that's what you get when you get it off the shelf. When you open it up, sadly, I don't have the manual. One thing I do love about this, and not only, you don't see many games do this, and I love it when they do it. When you open it, on the slip cover, so you've got the front cover of the game, so that shows you the game and the description on the back. On the reverse, when you open it up, if you pull it out, you've got a little picture of Wall-E just sitting there waving at you. And I found it's really nice. The copy that we got from CX when we bought this sadly didn't come with a manual. I did ask them. They didn't have one in stock. I did look online because I'm not big on box and complete, but I do like it when my games come with the manual that they originally meant to come with. I did look online for the manual. For some unknown reason, the prices vary and they're quite expensive, and I just couldn't justify spending how much they're asking for. I can't remember. I should have wrote it down. But the price that they're asking for a manual, but I looked online and the manual was black and white anyway, so sadly it wasn't in colour. I like a manual that's in colour. I prefer a manual that's in colour because that just shows that there's more creativity, especially it being a kid's game. You would assume like that's one of the first, like when I was a kid, that was one of the first things I grabbed when I was on the way home. from Blockbusters or Choices or Game Station or anything like that. When I had my game, the first thing I would do, I'm in the car, my dad's driving, I would pop it open, look at the disc. Oh god, that's the disc. Oh, I'm gonna be playing that soon. And I'd look over to the left, and I'd pull out the manual, and I'd be like, oh, and I'd go through it and look at all the descriptions and all the pictures and all the amazing things that I'm going to be able to do and I'm going to see and all the things I can do, and you know that would probably be the first and last time I'd ever look at the manual. But it doesn't matter. Like, it was there. It was just something, a treat to devour while I was on the way home, and then when I get home, I'd stick it in the Xbox, PlayStation, whatever. And then I would start playing, and I'd be like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, it's that nostalgia, it's that fact of, hype of, like, oh my god, I'm going to play Wall-E, I'm getting home, oh, look, there he is, you know what I mean? So, sadly, there's no manual comes with this edition, but, bit of insight, bit of a side story. I do like a manual, and I do like a detailed coloured manual, but hopefully, in the future, maybe I can find one and put a box to complete, but as of yet, it's got no manual. I do quite like the colour of the disc, though. It's like an orange yellow disc with Wall-E on it, with like a tire mark. Looks like Wall-E's drove over it. I quite like that. Obviously, the rest of the symbols on it: U for Universal, Disney, Pixar, THQ, all that. You don't need to know it. It's not really that important. But I just thought we'd just talk about the front of the disc. So, that's the game case. That's what you will see when you get it off the shelf. As for the studio itself, Heavy Iron Studios. So let me pull up my notes. Right, so bit of backstory on Heavy Iron Studios. They're still operational today. They were founded in August the 31st, 1992, so they're 22 years old. They've been going for quite a while. The studio was founded under the name Chemistry Entertainment by Steve Gray, who previously worked at a number of visual effects companies like Robo Abe and Associates and Digital Domination. Not really that important, but you can just see where they started off from. As time went on, they were eventually hired by THQ to work on a game based on the Evil Dead franchise. I've know that the Evil Dead franchise, they had games out, but obviously that was like, I was too young for them. I didn't watch Evil Dead till a lot later, so I didn't really know anything about it. So obviously I missed them. They were on the original Xbox, and that was my dad's. And I've talked about it before, but he kind of, whatever game he bought home was what we played. So if he didn't buy it, I didn't know it existed. But they did the Evil Dead games franchise, and while on its early stages of development on August the 31st, 1999, Steve Gray sold the company to THQ, which was renamed to Heavy Iron Studios. Their first game, The Evil Dead Hail to the King, was released in late 2002. Going through, where was I? I'm trying to go through my notes. I've got so many notes here. Most notably, they were known for doing Spongebob SquarePants games. Also, the fact that they did quite a few Pixar movie games, many of which received generally mixed to favoured reviews. Some were huge financial successes, others weren't. In 2004, Heavy Iron received an Outstanding Impact nomination and won a Best Team Award from THQ for their work on the Spongebob SquarePants movie game, which I played, which I loved. Incredibly hard, but I enjoyed. And The Incredibles, which again, I had The Incredibles game on I think I had it on the PlayStation 2, but I've some part of me telling me I had it on the Xbox. I can't remember. I had it on one of those, but I did play it. Both released the same year. Going from all my notes. During this period, their staff was reduced. They were try to get my words out. There was THQ announced in March the 17th, 2009 that Heavy Iron Studios was spun off as an independent company. So they became independent in 2009, which was effective on June the 1st. So that means it went into effect, with Lyle Hall being named as both its president and chief executive officer. During this period, their staff was reduced from 120 to 60 employees following the several rounds of layoffs. SpongeBob's Truth or Squared, which I'm currently playing on the Xbox 360 because it's backwards compatible. I might do an episode on it. I might not, but I'm quite enjoying it so far. Was their first game finished and released as an independent company in October 2009. Since then, they have worked on a variety of games from other publishers, usually in the position of a support studio. In 2015, they released their first fully original game, Fat City. On September the 17th, 2020, it was announced that Heavy Iron would be acquired by Keywords Studio for $113.3 million. The acquisition was completed on January the 13th, 2021. So that's a bit of a backstory of who they are, what the things they've done, the games that they've developed themselves. So starting at the top, so in 2000 they did Evil Dead: Hail to the King. Then 2002 they did Scooby-Doo: Night of 100 Frights. I had that on the GameCube. I never completed it, but I love Scooby-Doo. That's another bit of a side quest. I'm a big fan of Scooby-Doo. Love Scooby-Doo growing up, so I played that one. We've got Spongebob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Never played it, but I do want to play the remake on the Xbox. Spongebob Squarepants, the movie game, as I mentioned, I had it, I played it, loved it. Incredibly difficult. Then the same year, 2004, you had the Incredibles game. Again, played it, loved it. Also incredibly difficult. They have a... I will talk about this later on, but there's a thing with kids' games where they sort of, I'll get into it. I'll get into it later. This is a different section. 2005, they made a sequel to the Incredibles games, The Incredibles: Rise of the Underminer. A lot of people forget that there was actually a sequel that was made to the Incredibles movie with a tie-in game. Because obviously originally Brad Bird said he wasn't going to make a sequel. Because Brad Bird's one of these people is like, if there's not a good idea for a sequel, then there's no point doing one. And I completely agree with him. Even though I wasn't that big of a fan of Incredibles 2, I still enjoyed it, but I would have been happy if it was just the Incredibles and that's it. But that being said, there was a sequel made for the Incredibles 2 game the year after by these guys called The Rise of the Underminer. I didn't play it. I've seen some gameplay of it. It's a co-op sort of game. You play with a friend. One person plays as Mr. Incredible. One plays as Frozone. And you go from level to level. I've heard mixed reviews, mostly negative. But I remember when it came out, I did want to get it. Sadly, I never did. Then in 2007, they did Ratatouille. I'm currently on the hunt for Ratatouille. I can't find it anywhere for a decent price. This game, from what I've seen all the forums, this game is a bit of a collectible and it's a bit of a meme. So people sell it for really expensive and it's kind of hard to find. So I'm currently on the hunt for it because I do want to play it. But as of yet, my sort of quest for looking for it has not been futile. It has been futile, actually. It's been quite bad, but I'm trying. Hopefully, fortunately, I'll find it eventually. And then 2008, which is what we'll be talking about today. Even though on the back of the box it says 2007. In 2008, Wall-E came out, and then 2009 they did Up as well as SpongeBob's Truthful Squared. 2011 they did UFC Personal Trainer. In 2012 they did Family Guy Back to the Multiverse and Harley Pasternak's Hollywood Workout. I don't know what that is. I'm guessing it's a workout game. 2015 they did their own Fat City that came out. 2017 they worked on Amazon Odyssey, and then 2020 they did Pac-Man Mega Tunnel Battle for the Stadia, and that is it as of what they've done so far. They've worked on sort of co-developed games over the time. They helped co-develop Call of Duty World War II. Trying to think of other ones. They did the Grand Tour game. They helped on Marvel Avengers. They helped on Crash Bandicoot 4. It's About Time. They helped on Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, the new one. They helped with the Disney Infinity games, Epic Mickey 2. They did the port for the Wii U, which I think was the original port of that game, to be honest. And then eventually it came to Xbox and all other consoles at a later date, or maybe I've got that right way around. But these are the games that they worked on. Now, one thing I do want to mention before I move on is, and I'll mention this. Well, actually, let me look at my notes quickly. I think I mentioned it. Yeah, I do. I mentioned it elsewhere. Tell you what, skip that. Yeah, we'll move on. I talk about it later, and there's no point jumping ahead. So that was a bit of a brief description of Heavy Iron Studios. They've made a few games. Some of them you might know. Some of you might not know. For me personally, I'm quite interested in their Pixar, their Disney games that they've made. Maybe, like I said, I'm currently playing one of their last sort of SpongeBob games, which was Truthful Squared. I'm quite enjoying it, to be honest, and it's running quite well on my Xbox due to backwards compatibility. So again, maybe in the future I will do a review on a SpongeBob game. Maybe not. We'll see how I feel, and we'll see how the game goes. So far, I'm enjoying it. It's a SpongeBob game. You can't go wrong. It's platforming. It's silly. It's goofy. it's not bad. So we'll see one day I get around to it. But as of now, I'm quite interested in their 3 years of doing Pixar games, from Ratatouille to Wall-E to Up. I was going to say something quite clever then, and then I've lost it. I don't know. I was going to say something quite clever, but I lost it. But I do look forward to playing them when I can find them. Ratatouille has been a bit of a difficult one to find, but there's a lot of copies of Up out there, and Up is a co-op game. You can play it on your own, but the game is made to play in co-op. One of you plays as Mr. Fredrickson, and one of you plays as Russell. So I've got my little brother. So what I'm thinking about, if we can get that, we can play that together, and then that gives a better sort of judge of what type of game it is meant to be when it's played as it's meant to be played. So when that comes, it will come. But that is all she wrote in terms of the studio. So I'll take a little break now, and then after the break, we'll come back and we'll do the review of Wall-E the game. So let's go have a break, shall we? Let's have a relax. I know I need some water because I've been talking for 20 minutes straight now. Let's have a break, shall we? So we're back. I hope you're all relaxed. I hope you all took a breather, went for a walk, did yourself some tea, had a drink of water. I know I did. I had a bit of a stretch. I had to take the headphones off the head because it really makes my head itchy. I do need to get some new headphones later on. And I had some drink of water. Speak English, Luke. I had a drink of water to help sort of cleanse the palate, to make sure that I don't get all cotton mouth and dry mouth. It does happen when you're talking that you do get quite a dry mouth. But anyway, you don't want to know about that. That's not what you're here for. So we're on to doing the review of Wall-E, the 2008, because it is 2008. I did check it in the break. It is 2008 360 version of the Disney Pixar game Wall-E. So for starters, my overall thoughts and feelings are, I loved it. I generally did. This game is incredibly charming. It is really fun. It's really interesting. In terms of the fact of, when you get, for what this game is, it works well as a kid's game. You know what I mean? Like, you expect Wall-E, and that's what you get. The start of this game, you are pretty much dumped straight into Earth, and Earth is basically a tip. If you see Wall-E, you know what I mean. It is rubbish everywhere, and the game starts, and you are Wall-E, and you're just going about your day, just cleaning up rubbish, piling the bricks. Well, you don't really pile them, but the idea, right, is that you just clean up the bricks, and then hopefully you can clean up the planet, and then humans will come back eventually. So that's sort of the idea. So as Wall-E, you are just in this game. The game's a platformer, so you're going around, going through platforming. You're breaking up different types of bricks. So you've got basic bricks, which are just scrap. You've got heavy bricks, or heavy cubes as they call them, and the heavy cubes are made out of there's these like little service stations you can get, which is really, really cool. And you put these little charges in them, these service stations. You pull out, and then they suspense like dung bells, and then Wall-E will come in, grab them, bring them into himself. Sort of does his little machine thing he does as he's compacting them, and then he'll spit it out, and then he'll just like, you use the heavy bricks as like objects you can throw. So you throw them at like buttons, or you throw them at like this. It's like a basketball hoop, and you throw them at the basketball hoop, and you put 3 heavy bricks in. And what that will happen, that will activate something. So a piece of machinery will turn on, or that will take you to the next sort of little sandbox area. So you have that. Then you have these electric cubes that you can get, which are made out of phones, and you can pack these phones, and you can use them to charge up old energy sort of power stations. So it's, as a game itself, there's a lot to do. It's a platformer. It's quite charming. It's quite silly. Like, Wall-E makes his noises. Wall-E sounds like Wall-E. He goes, oh, Eva. He makes a cute little noises. And when he moves back and forth, you can hear the sounds of his tracks. And when his little eye sockets, I'm not really sure what you'd call them, but his little eye sockets, when they do the that's a terrible noise. But when he makes a little robot noise, when like he's looking at something, or when you zoom in and out, the sound effects are like, for what this is, you can tell that like it's spot on for what you would expect. The sounds are correct. The music is great. Like, in the background, it's like, something, what's the world's out there? Evening. I'm trying not to get copyright struck, so like I'm doing a bit, and that's I don't remember the words entirely, which is funny because I played this game quite a few times. There's a few sections in the game where that song comes on and it just repeats over and over, and you'd think that I remembered it, but I think like even though I enjoyed the song and it did get a bit earwormy as you went on, like it got to the point where like please end, like to stop because like it's too much. Even so, like I don't remember the words. I think my brain did a good thing for me. It was like, you know what, you don't need to remember that. We can get rid of it. We can remember key parts. But like the sound design's there. The whole singing in the rain sort of thing. The whole sort of old fashioned part of it. That's there. The aesthetics, the visual stuff is all there. Like I'll get into more detail about the visuals, but it just overall it works well for what it is. As a kids game, it looks exactly what you think. It plays how you would think how a game like this would play. It's a platformer. It works. Wall-E is incredibly responsive. If you charge forwards and then quickly decide to turn left or right, it's quite smooth. The animations are good for what they were for the time. You would expect that because it's Xbox 360, more power, more better processing, so it'd be able to do all these things. And again, the game works quite well. There are certain times where, like the sort of you do not. It's not completely texture popping, but you could tell like when you get close to certain things that it shows its age. And I'm not saying that all sort of kids games were like cheaply made, but as I've mentioned before, what you usually find with kids games is that they kind of have to rush development. It's kind of the idea of like, yeah, we want you to make, say, uh, Madagascar 2. Okay, by all means, we'll do Madagascar 2. But you have like 6 to 8 months to actually conceptualize, prototype, develop, test, and then release this game. Which sort of 6 to 8 months sounds like a long time, but trust me, I studied game design in college and university. It sounds like a lot of time, but it isn't. And granted, like they had, I think it was 120 or so people when they were working on it, maybe more, maybe less. But even so, you remember correctly, you don't have creative freedom so much. Like you could probably make the gameplay, but you kind of have to stick to the fact of, like, you could have designs for Wall-E. Then halfway through the process, Disney could come out and be like, "Oh, no, that design for Wall-E, yeah, we changed it. We decided that he's going to look like this instead. So now you've got to go through all your models that you've spent ages working on and detailing. You've now got to go back and change those models, or change certain level designs because that's no longer how the game's is going to look in the movie. And it happens all the time. And I think this is probably why we don't see as many sort of movie tie-in games. It's just because of the stress that comes of having to make a decent game, but also the fact of make it playable, and most importantly, make it look like exactly what it's meant to look like. You know what I mean? And when you have designers and two different studios who are basically don't know what each other's doing, it's kind of a nightmare. Like I said, you could have the whole sort of, oh, Eve was designed like this, but then we got near to the end and thought, you know what, we changed the design of Eve, which is easy for somebody who's making the movie to say that and have no issue and have no qualm. But at the same stage, it's that whole fact of, well, people on this studio will be like, oh, I've just spent like half our budget and most of the year designing Eve to make sure she looks and functions fantastically and that the animations work, and you've told me that you've redesigned the characters. Now I've got to go back and I've got to crunch and blah blah blah. Obviously, I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's what you used to find with a lot of sort of movie tie-in games, where it would be live action or it would be animated. It doesn't matter what it is, you always have to try to make sure that the game comes out in tandem with the movie release. Otherwise, if it comes out later, then it might not make as much money back as it would have if it came out day and date when the film or whatever came out. And this is the kind of difficulty that comes with not just game design in general, but movie tie-in game design. So that's my overall thoughts, is that for what it is of what they managed to do within the time frame that they had, I don't know how much time they had, but I wouldn't imagine it would be long. But for what they had, they did quite a good job. And like I said, overall, I quite like it and I quite enjoyed my time with the game. There were certain moments where, if I'm being completely honest, this game sort of ramped up in difficulty, and the reason for that is quite simple. Is what you have to imagine, and I've explained this before in prior episodes, but what you've got to imagine is the fact of you have these games, and like I said, they are built for kids, and they are got a time constraint, so they can't have a lot of levels, they can't do a lot of things that they wanted to do, they can't sort of really what's the word I'm looking for, uh, yeah, basically they can't sort of add things and add functions that would make the game amazing. They can't be that creative. They kind of have to stick to the mold that they have and kind of shape around it, if that makes sense. So what that means is that these movie tie-in games are quite short. So to make them feel longer, you have a first few levels where it teaches you what to do and how the game works. And it's quite easy, quite simple, quite easy for little kids. And then what you'll get is that halfway through the game, around about the middle section, the difficulty will start to ramp up and the game will start to get harder. Unintentionally harder, like out of the blue, for no reason whatsoever. The game will be from being easy to being incredibly hard. So the kid will feel like, oh god, this is really hard, I'm struggling. And what it widens the playtime. So a game that on its own in one shot is about 3 to 4 hours long feels 8 to 12 hours because of you're stuck on one level. Or maybe it's the fact it feels longer than that because you can't complete it, so you've got fuck it, and then you've turned the game off and you don't play it, and you come back like a week or two later. It makes the game feel longer because of the difficulty spike. It happens all the time in movie tie-in games, in kids games, just to make the games feel longer, to make it feel like the game is longer than it is. When actually, in all fairness, it's not. It's a very short game, and if you didn't have that difficulty spike, kids probably would have completed it very quickly. As I mentioned in my first ever movie time review, when I did Kung Fu Panda, that game didn't have a sort of difficulty spike, especially not how I played it. I kind of cheesed the game by using its systems against it. For more information, check out the Kung Fu Panda episode if you haven't. But that game didn't have it, and because that game didn't have it, I completed it within 2 to 3 hours. I completed it not even within a day. It was done within a few hours. Like, it was done and finished, and I was doing something else by dinner time. You know what I mean? Like, it was that quickly. So you do get these spikes for these games, and this game does have it completely. There'll be a moment in the first few levels where it's quite easy, it's quite simple, teaching you how to use Wall-E, teaching you how the platforming with Wall-E works, and then you get introduced to Eve, how Eve's flying works, how that all works, and then eventually it kind of accumulates into sort of, okay, now you know the basics, now I'm going to ramp up the difficulty, and it gradually gets harder and harder and harder to the point where by one stage I was just going to quit, and I'll get into that bit in the middle when I get into gameplay. But there was a section where generally I was like, fuck this game, I don't want to play it. I got that annoyed with it that I turned it off, and it wasn't until like later on I thought, you know what, I've calmed down, and I came back to it and I completed it and I finished the level, and then obviously I completed the full game, because I was going to do this review, only completed half the game, and I was going to be blatantly honest and tell people that because of that one level. But I persevered and I went through it. But it just shows, even with my years and years and years of experience playing different types of video games and being quite good at games, even I sort of got hit by this spike out of nowhere, and I was like, what? And like, it caught me off guard to the point where I struggled. So they do hit hard sometimes. Sometimes they're quite soft hits, and then they gradually get harder, or they kind of get a soft hit and they stay sort of a soft, sort of mild difficulty, and then some just spike all the way up to insanity. You're like, well, fuck this game, I ain't gonna play it anymore. So it just depends on the developers how they decide to sort of vary it. But like I said, that's my overall thoughts. So let me take a quick sort of breather. Let me have a drink of water. Hold on a second. I never edit out those sections. I just like to make it. It makes it feel more real. Like, not that anybody really wants to listen to me drink water, but it makes it more realistic. It makes me seem more human, more relatable. That I'm not just a machine talking to myself. That I drink fluids. It's a weird and a little sort of side quest there. Anyway, I am human. Trust me. Even though I might not seem like it at times. Anyway, so. Story. So, as I mentioned, story's good, as you would expect. It basically follows the story from the movie. As I said, I'm incredibly biased because I really, really like Wall-E. It's one of my favourite Pixar movies, if not the favorite, my number one Pixar movie. So of course it's going to be good, and it follows it quite well. So it's a very good sort of copy representation of the movie, obviously with the gameplay added in, with a little bit of extra stuff, but mostly it follows it quite well. It's quite good. So that's the story. Not much to say. If you've seen the film, you've played the game. Like I mentioned with the Kung Fu Panda, it follows it on quite closely, as you would imagine. I was kind of hoping for a bit more detail, a bit more extra sort of stuff, but sadly here in the Xbox version, and I would assume in the PlayStation 3 version, because they were made by the same team, that their stories are basically the same, following on with the movie, so no added details, just verbatim what happens in the film. So that's the story. Gameplay, like I mentioned, it's a simple platformer at first, then the difficulty ramps up quite quickly with an FPS mode. There is a mode where it turns into like it's like a first-person shooter, Call of Duty, Wall-E in disguise. You know what I mean? Like, this game goes from being a simple kids game platformer to a shooter, like, incredibly quickly. Like, you have the platforming section while Wall-E's on Earth, then you get into space, and you get on the Axiom, and you're playing as Wall-E, and you have a little bit of platforming, a tiny bit of platforming, and then all of a sudden, Wall-E gets a blaster, and then that's next thing you know, you're shooting steward bots. It's still a platformer, but now you've got a gun. And I'm like, whoa, where did this come from? I'm like, don't get me wrong, I remember Wall-E having, like, the gun is Eva's arm, because obviously Eve gets her arm taken off her, and Wall-E's like, oh no, and that freaks out. And obviously Wall-E's got the gun, and obviously I think if I remember correctly in the movie, I think he accidentally does shoot something. But I don't remember Wall-E going crazy like a full-on psycho and just shooting up off the ship. But in this game, that's basically what happens. You get given the blaster, and it's like, shoot everything. So I'm there shooting stewards. I'm shooting any robots that come to me. I even, like, you have people, and I was like, you know what, I'm tempted. So I shot some of the people. It's sick. I just wanted to see what would happen. Don't blame me. Don't judge me. It doesn't happen. They just kind of sit there and go, oh, what'd you do that for? Oh, what was that? Quite funny, actually, with the people. There's this little, it's like Frogger. There's a moment where you've got to go through and you've got to dodge them because they're on their little fat wheelchair, hover chair things. And as they come to you, you've kind of got to dodge them like Frogger. But there are moments where, like, you can just, like, jump at them, like, because one of the things that Wall-E does, you can jump up and you can turn into into his box form, and you can hit things. And so when Wall-E jumps, he goes into his box, and you can just, like, dash at things. So I did that to people. It was just funny because then people would fall out of their chairs, and there's this really cool animation where they'd be like a person, they're kind of wiggling their arms at like a baby, because obviously they can't. That's what they've been reverted to, because they can't walk. They haven't walked in years, probably never walked ever in their lives. That, because of the bone density and all that. There's a cute little animation where there's roll in there, and then sort of like a bot will come out of nowhere and pick them back up and put them back in their chair, which is cool little detail. They didn't need to. They could have done the fact of where they bump into you and it does damage to you. They didn't have to do the fact of if you jumped at them, they would fall out of their chair. And I just thought that was a really thing. Granted, when you shoot them, they don't fall out of their chair. They kind of just go, but you give me a gun, you have people. I'm going to try it. It's sick, but don't judge me. I'm a video game tester. I gotta test these things out. So I can tell you in the review that you can do that or you can't do that. It's an important thing that Disney left out, and obviously it's the most important thing I need to focus on. I'm not being serious, right? I'm joking. Anybody who's listening, it's a joke, not being serious, but it's just something I had to give it a go, and it made me laugh. Anyway, so that's the gameplay. Like I said, like it ramps up, it gets quite difficult. There is like one level, which is a level where I sat there and I went, "Oh God, I hate this game." And generally, like, the developers knew what they were doing, because the level was called 100% Uninsanity. 100% Uninsanity. And there's a reason it's called 100% Uninsanity, because it's fucking insane, right? They put the un there to make it seem, haha, look, we're funny. No, you're not, right? You're annoying. Basically, right, this level is the part of the movie where Wall-E falls down the trash compactor. Obviously in the movie he gets damaged, in the game you don't get damaged, because if he's damaged then you can't play as Wall-E. Kind of, they have to change things somewhere. But basically you fall into the trash heap underneath the Axiom, and you've got to travel and get the plant back. And this level is platforming, but like it's really, it's like Crash Bandicoot, incredibly precise platforming, that if you don't jump at the right time, or if you don't move at the right time, you're going to get pushed off, you're going to miss your platforms. There's loads of lasers for some unknown reason. And the one section where I was like, fuck this game, there was like, you had 3 tracks. So you had a big platform in front of you of a moving sort of treadmill. And from left to right, so on the left you had one that was coming down. On the middle it went up. And then on the right it changed from up or down. And on this thing you had these purple strips. These purple strips were electric, so if you touched them, even just to touch them a bit, it would take half your health down. So there's no difficulty in this game. You can't choose what difficulty you play on. You just start the game and that's it, right? So if you touch these electric things, if 2 hits, you're dead. If you land on one, you can't jump off it. You accidentally land on one or drive into one, that's it, you electrified and die, and then you've got to start all over again, right? So it's already unfair. Then you have these sort of blue plasma shields that will come down, and they start coming towards you as you're going forwards to get finally get to the end of the treadmills. And they will just come out fast like Tetris. Sometimes they come quite quickly, so now you've got to, where you are, you've got to get to another track to dodge this. So sometimes they're long strips, sometimes they're short strips, and so you've back and forth. And I'll be honest, I did this for ages. And at the worst part, they had a collectible right at the end, right at the most difficult part. And I was going to go for it at the beginning, but I thought, nah, screw it. I will finish the game and I'll come back, because I ain't getting it now, because if I get it now, I'm going to die. I'm going to have to do all that over again, because it took me forever to get to the end. So I completed the level, played the rest of the game, completed the game, and I came back and I collected that one collectible to get the full set. But I wasn't going to get it in that one go, because that long level can piss off. That was horrible. Like that for me. Like, as a veteran gamer, that was horrible. Think how bad that level would be for a child. Like, generally, like, they ramped up the difficulty so much that it became unfair, and they kept going. Like, it wasn't just the fact of we got to this level and that's it. We're going to start mellowing it out now. Like, if you, like, as a prize, be like, you struggled so much now, we're going to give you a surprise, and be like, you know what, we're not going to be so mean. We're going to bring the difficulty down a bit, and we're going to make the game a bit more easier for you. Great. No, it just got harder from there. And as you can tell, this is probably why I was like, you know what, I ain't going to complete this game. Screw it. That's it. It's done. You've ruined it for me. I'm no longer a fan of. I was losing faith in Wall-E. I was losing faith in my favorite Pixar movie. I was like, you can't do this to me. But I managed to do it. I persevered and I beat it. So who's laughing now? So that's the story. That's the story. That's the gameplay. As for world building and collectibles, it's a great world building. As I mentioned, it looks fantastic on the Xbox 360 for the time. Obviously nowadays it's still a bit grainy and not so great, but for the time, the visuals are quite nice. When you're in, let's call it New York, because I'm not exactly entirely sure as to the city that you're in, but like, let's call it New York for argument's sake. You're in New York. Obviously it's covered in rubbish, covered in trash. And the aesthetics is quite nice. It's quite beautiful. The platforming sections sort of make sense. They add into the world that you're in. Each level that you're in makes sense. When you're on Earth, everything's dreary. Everything has like a tinge of orange. The air and the quality is terrible. Like I said, I really, really enjoyed the whole sort of idea where you could get like these machines that would give you sort of different types of blocks, that you could get blocks off the ground, so you could dig on the ground and get sort of cubes there, and just standard basic cubes made out of trash. Or you could have special cubes of heavy objects, and you could get these heavy objects and then throw them at signs, as I mentioned. Same, you had these ones that were like made out of magnets, and you could use it to repel objects that were coming towards you. Fantastic. You had, like I said, you had the electric ones, which were made out of recycled phones. So the phones come down, you recycle the phones, and the cubes would like glow blue, and you can use them to charge pylons, or you could throw them at robots and shock them. Again, incredible different ways of world building that it all makes sense. one of the things I've mentioned loads of times, but I, as a big fan of narrative, I love narrative in any sort of format, but especially in gaming, when the world building fits in with the narrative, fits in with the situation that you're in, and it all sort of comes together, then that makes the world more believable. No matter even if the game is a kid's game or if it's like a really hyper realistic next generation game, if the world building works with the narrative, then you've got me in the narrative. Like, I'm here for the story because the world has brought me in. If the world doesn't look like what it should do for the narrative that you're in, I don't care how good the story is, I'm going to be sucked out every time I look at the visuals. That's the issue, but it's not the issue here, which is a good thing. Which I'm glad with movie tie-in games, especially with an animated movie. It's easy to do with an animated movie because it's already animated, so you don't have to do hyper realistic. You can kind of copy the style there. And like I said, you start off on Earth quite dreary, then you start moving towards the Axiom. It's very hyper realistic. Everything's clean, everything's surgically white, everything's pristine, everything's futuristic. It just looks lovely, and it looks just like the Axiom does in the movie. We're quite light. All the people look like they should do. The only gripe I had with the people is that they're meant to be wearing red jumpsuits until they try blue. Obviously, red's good, but have you tried blue? Sadly, not all the people have them. Some people are wearing yellow jumpsuits, some people are wearing green jumpsuits. And for me, as a hardcore fan, again, I'm nitpicking if I'm being completely honest with you folks. But me as a hardcore fan of the Wall-E movie, I was a bit like, because some people are wearing red, but not everybody. Like, I wouldn't mind if most people were wearing red and then some people were wearing blue. I wouldn't mind that because, again, continuity, it works. And as a fan of the film, that's what I would expect. And as a kid, I'm sure I would pick. I probably, then again, if I'm being honest, I probably might not care as much as a kid. But as an adult with a podcast, I can moan about it. So it's something that kind of a little nitpick that bothered me. But apart from that, like visually, world building, it all works fantastically. The collectibles, I really enjoyed the collectibles. The collectibles are souvenirs. There's quite a few collectibles, but the collectibles and the souvenirs. So you can find these. The first few collectibles that you find are characters from Toy Story. So there's Rex, Woody, Buzz, and Ham. You can also find the Luxo ball. You can find a light bulb. You can find, I think it's a stereo, one of them old-fashioned boombox, big sort of stereos people carry around with them. You had those, and there was, I think I mentioned the light bulb, and there was a cockroach. There's a few, like there's quite a few that you get. They're called souvenirs, and you can get these boom boxes that you can collect, and lunch boxes. And if you get all these sort of scrapbooks, lunch boxes, and boom boxes, they unlock skins for the characters for the multiplayer. So Eve can look differently, Wall-E can look differently, different sort of designs, colors, which is really cool. One thing I didn't mention in the gameplay that I just found in my notes, for some unknown reason I have it under the collectibles for some unknown reason. But this game, you don't get achievements for. It's not one of them games where like you get achievements for completing a level. So you complete level 1. Here you go. Here's 10G. Or here's a trophy. It doesn't work like that. This game is a sort of challenge-based game, so you get achievements for completing challenges within levels. So you get, like, when you play as Eve, you fly around as Eve. So there'll be one like race through this level with like in 2 minutes, or as Wall-E, crush a certain amount of cubes. So it'll be start for like 100 cubes, then I think it goes as high as like 500 to 600 cubes, which in the end, when I completed the game, I basically sat there in a pile of rubbish and I just started making cubes. Because you make 3 at a time, so I'd make 3 cubes, throw the 3 cubes, make another 3 cubes, throw them, and rinse and repeat till I got those achievements. Which I'm guessing that's kind of like the point. The whole point is to go back through the game and do it normally, but I ain't got time for that. But yeah, so the gameplay is very much of like challenges. That's how you get your achievements. That's how you get stuff. And again, that adds in with the sort of collectibles as well, which is probably why I added in with the collectibles. Is the fact of when you unlock these challenges, then you'll get sort of extra bonus stuff. So you'll unlock concept art from the movie. You'll unlock art designs that people that hire Heavy Iron Studios, what they made while, like the concept artists, what they were making while they were designing the levels. So, 1 second. another drink of water of high quality H2O. As a bit of a reference there for you for anybody who's watched Waterboy. But yeah, so it all adds in. So you do the challenges, you get more collectibles, and it just kind of makes the game a bit more sort of like, again, a bit more challenging, a bit more fun. If you're an achievement hunter like me, it's a bit annoying, but the challenges aren't hard. They're just, uh, if you don't know what you're doing at first, it's a bit of a nightmare. But once you know what you're doing, the challenges aren't so bad. That's if you're looking for full completion with collectibles. If you're not, it's not really that important. But if you're somebody like me, after is there for achievements, the collectibles are there. And like I said, the souvenir ones are quite interesting. You'll be going around a level, and also, oh look, there's Buzz Lightyear in the distance, and then you go pick up Buzz Lightyear, and then you get like 30G. It's quite good actually. It's quite fun. Um, so that's that. So you got the multiplayer as well. The multiplayer is local co-op. You can play to one to four friends online. Local co-op as of two. I never got the time around to doing this review to be able to test out the multiplayer with my brother. But I did go online and look at other people who played the multiplayer. And you had games like it's kind of like Capture the Hill, but the difference is that it's called Capture the Cube. So the idea is you go around a level, you find a cube, and you run around and you try to dodge all the other players, and you try to hold on to the cube for as long as possible. And the other players will come at you and throw cubes at you, throw other dummy cubes at you, and bump into you to make you drop the cube so they can sort of hold the cube for as long as possible. So you had that. You had one that was to do with racing. You had one that was like a horde mode where you've got to sort of like, you and another friend have got to like hold off the hordes of stewards. All fun sort of things. And sadly, I could never get a game up, so I couldn't see if like any of the skins that from the collectibles were any good or not. From looking at other people play it, it looked quite fun and looked quite interesting. And it's one that in the future, if there's ever a moment, because it's summer now, so if ever a moment in the summer when me and my brother are bored and we need something to play, then by all means I'll probably pull out Wall.E and be like, get out the spare controller and just play an hour or two on the multiplayer and just sort of have a little play around with it. But I didn't get to play it as of doing this review, but from what I could see, it looks quite fun and quite well done. So again, I've mentioned this before in the Kung Fu Panda one, but there's no need to add the multiplayer component. But then this is the time in the age when every game had to have multiplayer. No matter what the game was, it had to have some sort of multiplayer component. And this is just one of those games that happened to have it for no reason whatsoever. But I like it when they do it because, again, in a way, in my mind, it allows sort of the publishers and the company to kind of have a bit more sort of creative freedom, because obviously there's no multiplayer in the movie, so then it allows them to be like, well, what would let's create levels, let's create our own designs of what these levels will look like, and let's make our own sort of little bits of gameplay. And this allows us to be a bit more sort of creative than it's being constrained. Like, they're still kind of constrained because they've got to make sure it sticks to what the game is meant to be and look like, but they can still have a bit more creative freedom. So they don't need to add it, but obviously this was the age when they added it. And, sadly I never got to try it, but it looked quite interesting. So that's part one. Before I get into part two, I'm going to need to take a break because I've been talking for 32 minutes. And I'm in need of a refill of water, people. I'm in need of a refill of high quality H2O. I'm in need of it. So I'm going to take a break, allow you guys to have a chill, have a breather, and then we'll come back and we'll do a special mentions, and then we'll end it off quite nicely. So let's go take a break, shall we? Right, so part two. After I've had a nice relax, had a nice bit of drink, had a little bit shuffled around my notes a bit more, like I was in the newscaster, shuffled them, had a look through them, made sure that I was on topic for this second part. So in the second part, before I end, I just want to give a quick special mention to somebody I've been watching for a long time. I'm a big fan of, and it was actually the inspiration for me playing Wall.E and doing this review for you. Is a fella called, well, this is not his name, but this is his handle on YouTube, and I highly recommend you check him out. If you go onto YouTube and type in "I don't have a nose," look for it's like an animated sort of face with no nose. Go check out his YouTube videos; they're fantastic. Or if you're on Twitter, please check him out. His name is Felix Dihan. That's FELIXIDHAN. Give him a follow on Twitter. He's absolutely fantastic, and obviously he's done. He does my favorite sort of YouTube content, which is old video games. So he plays the likes of like Walt Disney's The Jungle Book Groove Party. He did the Chronicles of Nine-Liner, which is the wardrobe on PlayStation 2. Shrek Smash and Crash Racing. He did the Wall-E game for PlayStation 2. He did Scooby-Doo and the Cybertrace, Robots for PlayStation 2, Shrek the Third on PlayStation 2, Flushed Away PlayStation 2, Treasure Planet. He played that on PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2. Like, he plays a lot of really old games from games. Some games that I played, some games that I didn't. Like Charlie and Chocolate Factory on the PlayStation 2, which I had, and that game is incredibly. That game has a spike in half. Like, it's the first level is easy. The rest of the game is a slog, and it's long and it's hard. And I just realised what I just said, and I'm not going to carry on. It's a very hard game. Oh God. Oh, I'm not going to cut that out. I'm going to keep that because that was great. That wasn't even intentional. You know, if you caught it, you caught it. If you didn't, thank God. Anyway, but the reason I'm giving a special mention is the fact of it's not just that he inspired me to talk and play the Wall-E game, but he played it on the PlayStation 2. The video I watched was him playing the PlayStation 2 version, right? And I saw it and it looked really cool. It looked really interesting. And I thought, oh, I want to play that because I loved Wall-E. I want to get it for the Xbox 360 because it's the only sort of platform I have. It's next gen, so I would assume it's the same game, just looks better, looks nicer. Then when I get the game and I'm playing it, I'm like, this is not what I expected. You know, like, this is not what I remembered. It was that kind of moment where, like, Noah Gandalf goes into Moria, and they're at that crossroads, and he's kind of sitting there with that confused face. It's like, I don't know where I am. I don't know where to go. And that was me. I was kind of sitting there, be like, this place seems strange. It doesn't feel familiar, you know. But I thought, I didn't think of it, and I played the game, completed it, all that jazz. And I thought, you know what, a bit of nostalgia. I will go back and watch. His name's Felix. I want to call him Felix instead of I Don't Have a Nose. But I went back and I looked at his YouTube video of this episode, and I was like, hold on a second. This looks so much better than what I did. And it does. I recommend, if you do find his YouTube, again, I Don't Have a Nose. If you go to his YouTube and you check out all of his videos, but if you check out specifically the Wall-E video, and then you after you watch that, look for Wall-E, PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 gameplay, and just look at the differences. The differences are night and day. The PlayStation 2 version looks so much better. This looks more interesting. There's so much more to do. You know, there's a moment where there's a puzzle, like a kind of like a lock pick that you've got to do. You've got to like match, like Simon says, you've got to match the lights in a certain order to unlock the code to possess the level. The Xbox 360 didn't have that one. You know, there was like ones where you had to race against the top to beat the pardon me, all that water. See, makes you burp. It is good for you. High quality H2O. I keep having side quests. I'm sorry. But like, there's moments where, like, when Wall-E's on Earth and he's being chased by the storm, that he's got to sort of run away from it, and you've got these quick sort of racing levels where you've got to sort of jump over things. You've got to jump from building to building and down scaffolding and make your way down to floor level so that you can get back home before the storm gets you. That there's extra cutscenes. Like this Xbox 360 version didn't have much in the way of cutscenes. It has a few, but not a lot. These ones have long cutscenes. These has a cutscene at the beginning of the movie, which actually, beginning of the game, that shows something that the movie didn't show. There's a scene in the PlayStation 2 version that gives you more context, and basically what it is Wall-E is with all the other sort of Wall-E robots, all the other Wall-Es, and they're there on Earth. The last ship has left, and time goes on, and they're slowly sort of digging away. Anyway, there's a big storm, and all the Wall-Es, and you don't know which one's our Wall-E, but all the different Wall-Es are now going back to the hut where Wall-E lives. And so that's where the game starts. And then when the game starts, it basically begins with Wall-E on his own, and it kind of adds more context to the fact of there were other Wall-Es. They're all sort of the same, and then one day our Wall-E, I think I remember correctly, one of the Wall-Es gets hit on the head, or some sort of thing like that. I can't remember the a cutscene in full context, but I think like our Wall-E or one of the Wall-Es gets hit on the head, and then over time, sort of all the other Wall-Es that are quite normal, functioning as doing what they're meant to be doing, die off, and the imaginative, creative Wall-E survives, and that he sort of becomes sort of the hero for the rest of the story, and so on and so forth, and that's the movie, and huzzah! But again, it's more context. Xbox 360 version didn't have that, and I was a bit confused. I thought, well, hold on a second. Why would the PlayStation 2 version, the version that's meant to be less superior because it's last gen, be better than the more superior version? You know what I mean? Because whenever I research this game, because I was confused, a lot of people said, oh, the PlayStation 2 version had shorter levels. Their levels were shorter, so that kind of makes sense. The fact that because the levels were shorter, that they had to add in more substance to make the levels feel longer. Again, it's kind of the same idea of getting the difficulty spike and spiking it, making the game feel longer. The difference is it's just making the levels themselves feel longer by adding in more things in your way that slows you down. And that made sense. But then I looked at the 360 version and it kind of changed my opinion of it. Because I thought, well, hold on a second. Yeah, fair enough, we get longer levels, but longer isn't always better. You know what I mean? It's not always, just because you've got more time and more space to roam around and do things, doesn't mean it's good. If anything, I would rather a small level cramped full of different sort of features and things for me to do than have a huge level with hardly anything to do, and even though it's very big, it's a very big level, it's still quite linear. I would prefer the small, tiny, short, linear story to a big open linear story. You know what I mean? And while I was doing my research, what I found was that Heavy Iron Studios, they did the Xbox 360 version as well as the PlayStation 3 version. I think they also did the Wii version, or that might have been a different company. But they did sort of the next gen sort of versions, and the company that did the PlayStation 2 version was Asbo. The studio Asbo, they did the port for it, but here's the thing: they also did the port for Ratatouille. They also did the PlayStation 2 port for Up. They did they did Toy Story 3. So we all know how good Toy Story 3 was. They did Toy Story 3. And now you probably recognize them or recognize the studio name, but they're now known for doing Plague Tale. So they did the Plague Tale first game. Now they're doing Plague Tale Requiem coming out soon. So as I was looking at them, obviously I haven't got the list up with me now, but for a long time, Asbo Studios was doing a lot of PlayStation 2 ports of next-gen games. So whenever a game would come out on the next generation, they would always be doing the ports of the last generation. And it's kind of nice to see how they went from being the studio that was support and port, and now they're doing their own game, and now sort of the Plague Tale is done really, really well, and obviously they're making a sequel, and hopefully that will do quite well. And actually looking at that, I never completed Plague Tale, the first one, but after seeing how good they did with the port of the PlayStation 2 version of Wall-E, it actually inspired me to be like, you know what, I'm actually really quite tempted now to go back and to play Plague Tale and to complete it. I know it sounds quite weird, but it makes me kind of thought of like, if that's what they can do, if they can add in things that make the game somewhat more interesting and fun, and make it more kiddie, in a game, and try to make it the levels seem longer by making the games have more things, but also have things that are fun, not just things that are there just to kind of get in your way. It kind of made me think of like, if this is what they can do here, what are they doing now? If that's what they did then, what are they doing now? So I just wanted to see that progression. So I am going to go back and complete Plague Tale, and hopefully when the new Plague Tale comes out, and play that one, enjoy it, and hopefully Asbo Studios will have a new fan in me. But I I just wanted to mention that because I just thought it was really, really silly and really funny that the PlayStation 2 version feels and looks more superior than the next gen version. It doesn't make sense, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. That is the basic facts. Like, if you look at the gameplay of the PlayStation 2 version, it looks so much better and more fun than the 360 version. And that's a shame because my overall verdict has changed. Originally, as I said, I enjoyed the game. It was quite good. Yes, there was definitely a moment where the difficulty ramped up so much I told the game to fuck itself, and I was like, I'm not completing this game at all. But also on the other sort of side, when it works again, it's quite interesting. It's quite fun. I'm a big fan of Wall-E. The sound design's great, level design's great, story again is great because again it follows on from what the movie is. I'd be a bit hypocritical if I said, oh, the story's not so good, even though it follows the story of the movie, and I say that I like the movie. So again, it would be hypocritical if I didn't like the story. But yeah, so overall, on its own, without knowing the PlayStation 2 thing, I would have rated it out of 10. I would have given it like a 7. But knowing the PlayStation 2 version is better, I don't know. It brings it down to like a 5. On its own, I would rate it as a 7, but knowing that the PlayStation 2 version exists and just feels more superior and fun, I don't know. I just feel like I would just. It feels like my rating would have to go down because I know it's two different studios. But if a studio working on older hardware can make a game seem better and more interesting, then the game that has superior hardware and they can do more because they have more power to work with, but they didn't. It kind of just makes the idea of like, well, I had loads of faith in you. Now you've kind of lost my faith because it looks like you didn't do as much as you could have. And I know it contradicts what I said in the beginning, but it just seems a bit strange as all. So on its own, Wall-E, as it is, I rate it a 7. If you can find it anywhere, by all means, pick it up for your 360 or PlayStation. Give it a go. Play it. If you've got little kids, they will enjoy it. But I will sort of give you a warning. It will get harder very quickly. So be ready for when that spike comes and when for the kids starts throwing their controller at the TV and you need to go out and buy a new one. Get ready for that. But if you have a PlayStation 2 and you can find a copy of Wall-E on the PlayStation 2, try picking that one up as well. Give that one a go. But I just want to say thank you before I end off. Just to say thank you to Felix. I don't have a nose for not just sort of inspiring me to go out and play this game, but also the fact of you got my hopes up. That if it wasn't for you, I would have enjoyed this game more. So damn you. Only joking. But most definitely, all jokes aside, please go check him out. I don't have a nose on YouTube. And give him a follow on Twitter. He's a fantastic guy. He deserves way more love and attention for the effort that he puts into his videos. They deserve a lot more attention than they get. So please check him out if you like old video games and nostalgia. He is the guy that you want to be following on YouTube at the moment. But yeah, so that's this part. That's a special mention. On to the end. Let's go then. Let's go to the end. And that is all she wrote. Completely and utterly the end. So I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I hope you liked it. I hope you thought this was interesting. I hope you found it funny. I do apologise for my innuendos. I'll be honest with you, generally weren't planned. And looking back on listening back, I did a lot more than I thought I did. Like I mentioned, I didn't even realise that I was doing majority of them. So if any time one came up, I do apologise. This is a kid's game, god damn it, gotta be professional. But I do apologise for that, but hopefully you found them funny, even though I didn't mean to do them. You can get some enjoyment out of them and make you smile, so that's all good. Back to business, though. One thing I do want to mention before we get into the selfish plugs of all my social medias, I do want to say again, World of Books, thank you for sponsoring this episode. Thank you for sponsoring the show. I love those guys. I love what they do. And if you guys, I want you guys to love them as well. And I want you guys to support them. So go onto their website, www.wob, or you can just type in Google World of Books, find their website there. Go there, find yourself your next fantastic read. They also do video games as well. I've actually found some video games on there myself that I'm looking at getting in the future. So any sort of old 360 games, PC games, next gen, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, they do have a lot of games on there as well. So you just got to go through them and have a look. So it's not just books; they do video games as well. Vinyl, I think they do vinyl as well. So get on there, have a look. Remember to use my code NERDY10. That's NER. Hold on. Yeah, NERDY. Yeah, that is right. Sorry, I am dyslexic. Have got it written down. NERDY, nerdy10. If I spelled that wrong, most likely have. I think I have. I'm now second guessing myself, but I have to end this, so I don't want to spend time second guessing it. But yeah, nerdy10, all higher case. When you're at checkout, put that in and you get 10% off. So again, once again, thank you to Walder Books for sponsoring the show and helping you guys to save money. So on to the selfish plugs. So as always, as you guys know, if you are a frequent listener to the podcast, that you can find my podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. You can find this podcast on Spotify at Nerdstalgic Podcast. You can find it on Anchor. You can find it on Google Podcasts and Amazon Music Podcasts. I'm now on YouTube. Just type in the Nerdstalgic Podcast and just look for my flaming face and you'll find me there. I'm currently putting loads of old episodes up, so there might be, if you're a recurring listener, thank you for that if you are. But if you're a new listener, there's some older episodes on there. The reason I've done a YouTube is to make the show a lot more accessible, because there's a lot of people ask me and say to me that I want to listen to the show but I don't have access to Anchor, I don't have access to Spotify, anything like that. So how can I listen to the show? So I thought YouTube's free, you don't have to have an account to use it to watch videos. So I formatted some of my older episodes on there. So if you do want to listen to old episodes, by all means, head over to my YouTube, again, the Nerdstalgic Podcast, and check out what I'm doing there. And you can listen to old episodes there. And it would really help if you like and subscribe and share it with friends when you're on there. And also, very, very important. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to give me a star rating. Basically, the star rating helps me. It's with Spotify's algorithm that if I can basically, the most amount of stars that I can get, the higher I go on the ratings and more people can listen to the show. So you can rate from 1 to 5 stars. 5 stars being the best thing you've ever heard in your life. 1 star being basically Vogon's doing poetry. The worst thing you ever heard in your life. Your ears are bleeding and you just want it to end, already. So whatever you feel like is fair, 1 being bad, 5 being good, whatever you feel like is a good rating. And yeah, so that's everything. So I've done the business side, there's a sponsor, I've done the selfish plugs, I've done the ratings. That's all she wrote. So if you agree or if you liked it, check out more episodes. If you agree or disagree with what I spoke about today, or if you've played Wall.E, or if you have any other sort of movie tie-in games that you think I'd like, or you want me to look at in the future, by all means, hit me up on Twitter, Nerdstalgic_pod, and that's everything. So, as always, guys, thank you for listening to this episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast, and I'll check you. I'll check you. Yeah. I check you out. That sounds weird. I'm not redoing this because I'm not redoing this. So I will hear off you. That's better. I'll hear off you next time. So cheerio, guys. Bye bye. Oh God. I'm sorry.